Hi, I'm Dale Adams of Planning Ahead of Time, and I'm speaking with.
I'm Louise Bates from Heathcote Holistics.
Okay, Louise, we've known each other a long time now. So
Yeah.
we knew each other from years and years ago when I would come and have some complementary therapies with you.
Yeah, it was a long time ago. I've been doing it now for about 25 years. So yes, it's nice to get back in touch and connect with you through the work that we do.
Yeah, so a couple of years ago, I think maybe not even that I then came back to you and we reconnected because I came to see you when my mom was suffering with dementia, and I came for her to have some treatments with you just to see if it could be nice for her and nice and relaxing.
Yeah, I remember meeting your lovely mum and really connecting with you because I know I've said this before, but I lost my mum through dementia, and I could see, the love and the bond that you had with your mum. And it just reminded me of what it was like when I was looking after my mum through her dementia as well. So yeah, we sort of connected through that, and we started talking about other things that we're probably going to talk about now. So yes, it's good to connect with you again.
I think what I found with dementia is, although it's very, very hard to watch your loved one going through that, there's also something so special about the time that you share with them. Because I do look back and think, had my mum not got dementia, I wouldn't have spent the amount of time with her that I did in her last couple of years, because I gave up other things I was doing to become her main carer. And I know that you were the main carer for your mum as well.
Yes, yeah. So with my mum, I was working very busy as a complementary therapist. Mum's dementia was getting worse and worse, and we got a private nurse going in Monday to Friday into her home to get her up and then to put her to bed, and we would sort out her meals in the daytime. And then I would look after her on Saturdays and Sundays. And then when COVID came and the pandemic sort of closed me because I wasn't an essential service, I said to the private nurse, I said, how would you feel about doing the weekends? Because I'm available to look after mum.
Yeah.
So in a way, it was a blessing because I would never have just closed my business and just looked after mum. So I had a good year with her where I'm not saying it was all easy because, as you know, it's and trying to get a hospital appointment during the pandemic and trying to get my mom what she needed was an absolute nightmare, but that's another story. But I'm grateful that I was in a position that I could be there for her.
Yeah.
And we had, I look back now and I still remember one of my happiest times was she was maybe 2 or 3 days away from dying. And I was holding her hand, but I got my laptop in my other hand because she was asleep, and I was just sort of doing some work. And every now and again, "You all right, mum?" And she'd just go back off to sleep again, and she was comfortable. And she just opened her eyes and she looked at me and she just beamed. And I went, "Oh, hello, you're okay." And this beam just got bigger and bigger. And she just absolutely glowed with this massive, it was like she was seeing something that wasn't there. It was like she was seeing something else, and it was almost like she could see into my soul. It was a really special, spiritual, magical moment that I ended up with just tears coming down out of my eyes. And I never like to cry in front of my mom because I like to protect her from seeing, even when I was grieving my son Matthew, I protected her. I didn't want her to see me like that. I just could, the emotion just came.
Right.
And I was just crying. I was like, "Oh, mom, look what you're doing to me. Stop it." And then it lasted about 5 minutes. And then she just went back to sleep. And I was like, what was that? And at her funeral, when they came to take the coffin away, I got emotional when they ended the service, and all I got was her face with her big beam, and it was like that connection, and it was like her saying, "It's okay, I'm okay."
Yeah.
So, would I have had moments like that if I hadn't been her main carer? So, yeah, there were tough times, but I'm so grateful that I was in a position to be able to be her main carer, because she got, like your mum, she got the best care because you were there for her, and I was there for my mum, and I'm so grateful for that.
Yeah. And it's strange because, again, I feel grateful for the time that I had. And I know with my mum, for different reasons, her time with us was cut short. So, as you know, my mum died a few months ago. And it wasn't through the dementia, so it was unexpected. But again, that 3 to 4 weeks when she was in hospital, and I was able to spend that time. And also I actually stayed there in the last week of her life, and I actually slept in bed with her, which was, at the time, I didn't tell my dad straight away. I didn't tell anybody. He found out about 3 days in that I was actually staying there, because I rang him one morning very early and saying, you need to come in, Mum wants to see you. And then when he got there, he's like, have you been home? Sort of joking. And I just sort of went, And I think at that point, he obviously gathered that I wasn't in fact going home. But there are such moments, as you say, that are so special, but equally, obviously, an awful lot of it's so heartbreaking. But also, you had lost your son. So your son died, again, from cancer.
Yeah.
What obviously this is for our group planning ahead of time on Facebook. And what I wanted to really speak to you about is, what had you planned? Because he was very young, wasn't he?
Yeah. So he was 24 when he was 25 when he was diagnosed with cancer, and he was given a very poor prognosis from the start. It was stage 4, and the type of cancer he had, it was very rare, very aggressive. And they said chemotherapy doesn't work for this type of cancer, radiotherapy doesn't work for this type of cancer, and it's just a matter of time.
Wow.
And even with that, knowing that, we still didn't talk about death and when it was going to happen. I just became a mum on a mission, because I just wanted to search for the cure. We looked at all the different diets and, all the different alternative and complementary treatments out there, and clinics in Germany. And, I was on a mission.
Yeah.
And he lived for 2 years from his diagnosis, which is a miracle in itself.
How long did they give him at the start then?
We didn't ask for the
Okay.
time, and they didn't offer. I didn't want them to, because I feel if a doctor says you've got 6 months to live, if you're a good patient and you believe everything your doctor says, you will die in 6 months.
Okay.
And I work as a complementary therapist. I know there's a lot of other things outside of the conventional medical model. So, I was like, Matt, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, we're going to get a nutritional therapist. And he was really on board with it. There were some things he didn't want to do, and I had to work with him because he was an adult and, couldn't force these things onto him. So over the 2 years, he was, doing more and more sort of healthy protocols. And I'm sure that it extended his life. And it was only the week before he died that we actually started talking about death and dying, and he instigated it. I didn't, because I just could. As a mum, I just couldn't. The thought of having that conversation was like not having it.
Yeah.
But he was like, "Mom, we need to talk. This is what I want." And I listened through, wiping away the tears, thinking in my head, "This isn't happening."
Yeah.
He talked about how he wanted his funeral to be at St. Peter's Church in Leamington. He wanted to be cremated. He told us what he wanted us to do with his things, his finances. But there were other things that weren't shared that we didn't even think about, like passwords, things that we would need to sort out after death.
Yeah.
Information that we would need, in terms of, just sorting his affairs out. We didn't go into the nitty-gritty. And, that's why it's so important that we don't have to wait until we're dying. We don't have to wait until we've had a diagnosis. Let's do these things while we're fit and we're healthy, because it's so hard. You're dealing with all of these emotions that are going on in your body. You're just overwhelmed with the situation. So then start talking about all of this stuff as well. As a mom, I found it was one of the most painful conversations I had.
Yeah. Well, there's the instant word when you started to talk in my head was painful, because I'm very fortunate I haven't had to go through that. But even starting to think about it, the most horrendous thing, as they say. However, you said that obviously since he died, I mean, you've actually felt him around you. You've written a book called Letters to Matthew. And you've also written a book called A Gift for Grief, and doing a podcast now, A Gift for Grief. So for you, it has literally been life-changing, but you are now, again, it's sort of a mom on a mission, but it's now a new mission, isn't it? It's to help people understand and try and cope with their grief. And how are you finding everything that you're doing?
Well, I've just found this purpose. I found this purpose through my grief, and I've met some incredible people from doing this. And, you know, I've just had to do something positive. If you go through these awful times in our lives, life isn't just always a bed of roses and bad things happen. And I don't want to be defined as I'm that person who lost a son through cancer. I want to obviously keep Matthew's memory alive. So by doing the work that I'm doing, I'm also keeping his memory alive. But I just feel it's a purpose. I'm just being drawn and pulled in this direction where, if I can, anything I do in my work now, whether it's through my books, whether it's through my podcast, whether it's doing, Zoom talks like this, if it helps just one person, then it didn't happen for no reason.
Yes.
And that's why I feel it's just part of my life now, and it's who I am. And
how do you know?
It's not a path I've chosen. It's not a path I've chosen. And if I could, it is the way it is, but I'm making the best of it.
Yes.
And it just fills my soul.
If you had known, obviously, if you had thought before this happened about what was going to happen and pre-planned for it, is there anything that you would have thought to have done or said before Matthew died that you didn't do?
In terms of end of life,
I think you mentioned a lock of hair, didn't you? Something that you wouldn't have thought of at that time.
Yeah. Looking back now, there's so many things like, why didn't I think to take a lock of his hair? And nobody at the hospice sort of said, would you like a lock of his hair? And that would have been a nice thing. Also, knowing the dying process, how do they know when it's going to happen, Because even if you know, you can't be prepared for it. But there are, I look back and it's a really hard one. I mean, the reason I wrote A Gift for Grief is hopefully putting all the things in that will hopefully help somebody else if they're in that situation. I talk to my daughter now. We talk about what we want when we die. We're already sorting out our, death book, putting our information in so that, if I go, whether it's my husband or my daughter, whoever is sorting out my affairs, will know, what I want, what my passwords were, because we've got so much digital information now, haven't we?
Our digital footprint is huge, and I think people don't really think about just how much we have digitally and out there. But also, as you're saying, it's that planning and knowing. Admittedly, when you managed to speak with Matthew or allowed that conversation to happen, you had the conversation through pain. And I think a lot of the time, and this is my view from the experience I've got and the people I've spoken to, is when somebody gets a terminal diagnosis, that's when they start to put their affairs in order and put plans in place. But they are doing it through the pain of that diagnosis. And as you rightly said, the family don't always want to hear it then, because none of us want to accept that you can't change that fact, because we all want our loved ones to stay in the physical world with us as long as possible. So I do feel that if people, even when they're younger, and like you now with your daughter and me with my children, we talk about it and have done so, whether it's sort of songs for funerals or what would happen. I mean, I can remember my brother being out on the beach, and he'd been on the beach where the tsunami hit many years ago. And he'd moved to the next beach. So when the tsunami hit, we didn't hear from him for 48 hours. And we assumed that he died in the tsunami. So it was an awful 48 hours. But before he left, he'd actually spoken about his money and things and what he would want if, when he was traveling, anything had happened to him. And I look back and think, what an important thing that was. I mean, we're very, very fortunate. He didn't die in the tsunami. My brother is fit, well, living now with his family. But at the time, we didn't actually know some of what he would have wanted to happen because he made that comment. And you think, it's quite important, really, isn't it, to know these things? Because you said that your son Matthew didn't have a will.
No. And it's a gift. When you pass that information on, it is that you're giving them a gift. When my mom died, she was a control freak. She had everything in place. She paid for her funeral. She paid the organist. As it happened, she didn't get the funeral she wanted because it was in COVID and we weren't allowed to sing. And we got a bit of a rebate because we didn't need the organist. It was crazy times, weren't they? But she was so organised. She wrote her own eulogy. We knew exactly what she wanted. But there were other things because of her dementia. By the time we realised how bad the dementia was, her electric bills were in the wrong envelope. It was in the gas. All her bills were mixed up. And dealing with stuff was really difficult. I just managed to scrape getting power of attorney through before she was officially diagnosed with dementia. Because then it's
lacking capacity.
You need to get these things sorted. And that's something me and my husband are talking about now, sorting about getting our power of attorney sorted now, because don't leave it, because that can be a nightmare for people trying to look after their loved ones.
We didn't have it in place. So and again, this is why I started planning ahead of time, which you probably won't know, because when my mum got dementia, she was the head of the house. My dad had never used a cash point card ever, and he's in his 70s. And my mum did everything. And then we started to realise something was wrong because she'd basically given away money and given bank details to scammers. And we started to think, hang on, there really is something more than we were seeing is going on here. And so I then started to try and look into everything for her and help with the planning. But it's so difficult when they did everything that they got the financial lasting powers in place, which was done when they went and got their will. So that was done through the solicitor, but we didn't have it for health. And I can remember literally making phone calls and saying to my mum, just say yes, mum. They need to know that I can deal with this. Say yes, mum. And she'd say yes. And I can actually remember holding up pieces of paper with her date of birth and things on and her address on and trying to ask her, just read that when they are, just to try and get it that we could even speak to people on her behalf. And I instantly were like, we need LPAs, you need them, we need respect for them. You've got to have these things in place because somebody needs to be able to speak for you when you can't. And we didn't see it coming. And by the time, as I say, we didn't manage to get her LPA in place. She'd lost capacity before that. But she had given me verbally ability to speak to doctors and hospitals on her behalf because I've been attending appointments with her. But that's why I set up Planning Ahead of Time, because I was like, people need to be doing this. This is really important. I mean, it's life changing if this isn't in place for someone.
No, it's really interesting because I spoke to you on the podcast and I spoke to another lady that also organises Planning Ahead of Time. And each time I thought, yeah, I've got to get this sorted. I've got to get this sorted. And still hadn't got it sorted. And then I did a podcast with my husband talking about how we both did grief differently. And he told me during the podcast that he's already started his death book. He told me on the podcast. And I was like, oh, that's really good. So I didn't know, but he has already started putting his information into a book. So it's sort of right, if he's doing it, I've got to do it as well. And it's easy because he's got a lot of the information already there. I've got 3 websites.
Yeah.
Nobody else knows the passwords to those websites. You know, when I'm not here anymore, people are not going to be able to access information unless I have documented it somewhere. So it's really, really important. Do it now.
Anyway, I very much appreciate you coming on and just talking to me a little bit about what you've gone through and some of the planning that maybe you're now thinking about or would have been good to have in place. But you can be found where if people want to have a look at you and your books and what it is you do.
So I'm Louise Bates. My business is heathcoatsholistics.co.uk. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram. My books are on Amazon. My podcast is A Gift for Grief. So hopefully
Very good.
connect with me somewhere.
And I was episode 2.
Yes.
I was episode 2, but the one with you and your husband is actually brilliant. It's a very honest and also quite amusing at times conversation, but very much worth a listen for anybody listening. I'll also put some of the links into the chat when this goes up. So thank you for your time. I'll speak to you soon.
Thanks, Dale. Lovely talking to you.
Bye.
Bye.